"Don't you dare touch her." His voice cut through the hallway like thunder. Vivian's hand froze midair, still inches away from Soraya's cheek. And there he was, Alexander Hale, America's youngest billionaire, standing between his fiancée and the maid everyone treated like dust. For a moment, no one breathed, but in that stillness something shattered. Not a glass, not a plate, but the lie that some people are worth more than others. That was the moment Soraya knew. She was no longer invisible. The mansion was too quiet. It wasn't the kind of peaceful, quiet you associate with luxury. No, this was the kind of silence that swallowed joy, that echoed with invisible weight, the kind that made even footsteps feel like offenses. Somewhere in the back wing, a young woman stood at the sink, rinsing a wine glass that probably cost more than her monthly wage. Her name was Soraya Elwood, a name too soft for the life she'd had. At 24, her hands moved with grace, but her eyes, they carried the exhaustion of someone who'd seen too much too early. She wore a crisp black uniform, the kind that left no room for expression. Her hair tightly pulled back, her lips pressed into silence. She wasn't born to this, but life had a way of rewriting people. The mansion belonged to Alexander Hale, America's youngest tech billionaire. Handsome, brilliant, and cold as polished steel. He was a man of few words and fewer emotions. No one in the house ever truly heard his voice unless it came with an instruction. Most days, he moved like a shadow, and people learned to stay out of the way of shadows. His fiancée, Vivian Cross, however, was anything but quiet. A fashion model with a flair for cruelty, Vivian was sharp-tongued, high-maintenance, and allergic to humility. To her, Soraya wasn't a person. She was background noise, an accessory with a mop. Soraya. The name was flung like an insult through the hall. She flinched, dried her hands quickly, and stepped into the grand living room where Vivian sat lounging in silk and judgment. "Yes, ma'am. You didn't polish my heels again," Vivian said without looking up from her phone. A single red nail gestured toward a pair of stilettos on the marble floor. "I'll do it now," Soraya said softly, lowering her gaze. "You should have done it an hour ago. Am I supposed to manage you like a child every day?" "I'm sorry, ma'am." "You're always sorry, but you're still useless." Soraya bent down, lifting the shoes as if they were glass. Her chest ached, but her face gave away nothing. She had trained herself not to cry, not here, not anymore. Then the front door opened. She heard it before she saw him, the sharp click of expensive shoes. Alexander had returned. Vivian straightened immediately. "Baby," she cooed, "you're home early." Alexander walked in wearing a navy suit that could stop time. His eyes swept the room once before he passed by without a word. No nod, no glance, no warmth. Vivian, unbothered, grinned. "He's just tired," she said casually, even though no one had asked. That night, Soraya lay on a thin mattress in a room smaller than some of the mansion's closets. She pulled a wrinkled photo from beneath her pillow. Her mother, smiling wide, arm around a younger Soraya outside a tiny bookstore in Arizona. A life before life. She whispered like a prayer. "Just one more day, Mama. Let me get through just one more day." What she didn't know was, everything would change tomorrow. The next morning arrived slow and golden, spilling soft sunlight through the massive arched windows of the Hale mansion. But inside, nothing felt warm. By 6:00 a.m., Soraya had already made the bed, scrubbed the sinks, and ironed 3 shirts that weren't even hers. Her uniform was freshly pressed but still stifling. Black, buttoned to the neck, and starched enough to scrape her collarbone. It felt like a costume for someone she never agreed to become. The kitchen smelled of sour coffee and rich silence. As she set the breakfast table, Vivian's heels clicked down the stairs like thunder. She was already dressed to kill in head-to-toe designer, sunglasses on though the sun hadn't quite reached the dining room. "I'm flying to Paris for the show," Vivian announced to no one in particular. 3 days, the suite better be ready. I left a list of everything I want cleaned, folded, and color-coded by the time I return. Alexander stood near the doorway, scrolling through his phone, as disconnected from her words as a man reading the weather. And Soraya, Vivian added, dropping her oversized bag at the front door, don't even think about stepping into the master bedroom. That space isn't for people like you. Soraya lowered her head. Yes, ma'am. By 10:05, the car rolled away carrying Vivian's perfume and chaos with it. And for the first time in months, the house exhaled. Soraya stood motionless at the base of the stairs, mop in hand, listening to the silence settle like dust. No yelling, no clatter, no whiplash commands. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Just 5 minutes." She slipped into the kitchen, turned on the radio, and let the music fill the walls. A pulsing Afrobeats rhythm danced into the air. It crawled into her chest and stirred something buried, something soft and almost forgotten. Joy. Soraya smiled, not the polite kind, the real kind. She began sweeping, then twirling. One foot led the other, shoulders loosened, breath deepened. A laugh escaped her lips, light and unfiltered. She danced across the marble floor like no one was watching, because no one was, until a thought struck her. Why am I still wearing this uniform? She rushed to her tiny room, pulled open her old suitcase, and found the only thing in the world that still felt like hers. A burgundy dress with sleeves that kissed her wrists and a hemline that floated like poetry. She'd saved for 5 months to buy it from a thrift store on 5th Avenue. She changed, added a touch of lip balm, and stared at herself in the cracked mirror. For the first time in ages, she saw Soraya. Not the maid, not the shadow, but the woman. She twirled once and whispered, "Today I dance." And she did. She danced barefoot in the grand hallway, spinning like she belonged. She danced through the sunbeams, past the staircase, even into the master bedroom she'd been told never to enter. The air was different in that room, scented with cedar and quiet money. She didn't care. Holding a wooden spoon like a microphone, she sang softly with the music. She twirled. She laughed. She forgot. But she didn't know the front door had just opened. Alexander had returned. His meeting downtown had been abruptly canceled. No one had informed Soraya. No one ever did. He paused when he heard the music. He furrowed his brows, music in his house. Then, laughter, female, real, soft. He walked up the stairs slowly, carefully, following the sound like a man chasing sunlight. The door to the master bedroom was open just a sliver, and through it he saw her, Soraya, spinning barefoot, singing into a spoon, dress fluttering like a flame, hair free and bouncing, smile unguarded, eyes closed, a woman alive. Alexander Hale did not breathe. For the first time in years, something cracked in his chest. Not pain, not regret, something quieter, something warm. Awe. He leaned against the door frame, mesmerized. She didn't know he was there, not until he chuckled. It was faint, barely audible, but it was enough. Soraya froze, her eyes snapped open. She turned. Her face turned crimson. The spoon dropped from her hand. "Mr. Hale," she gasped. I didn't know you were home. I wasn't trying to. This isn't." He raised a hand gently. "Don't stop," he said softly. You were dancing beautifully." She backed away, almost tripping on the rug. I wasn't supposed to be here. I know that. I didn't break anything, I swear." Alexander stepped into the room slowly. "I've just never seen you like this," he said, voice lower now. "Like you." Soraya gripped the edge of the nightstand to keep from collapsing. "I'll change. I'll go back to work," she whispered. "You don't have to," he said. "Not yet." And in that moment, something shifted. She wasn't invisible. Not to him. The silence in the room was thick, like velvet, heavy and warm. Soraya stood frozen, the folds of her burgundy dress still catching the afternoon light. She clutched the edge of the nightstand like it was the only thing keeping her from unraveling. Across from her, Alexander Hale, the man who had never looked at her for more than 2 seconds, was now staring at her like she had just rewritten his reality. "I should go," Soraya murmured, eyes lowered. "You don't have to," he said again, more firmly this time. She looked up. Their eyes met. For the first time, he was looking at her, not through her, not around her, but at her. There was a strange stillness between them, suspended like a breath held too long. "You looked happy," Alexander said finally, almost like it surprised him to say it out loud. Soraya blinked. "I'm sorry." He shook his head gently. "Don't be." She stepped back, her fingers brushing against the silk curtain, her heart beating far too fast for a quiet room. "I wasn't trying to disrespect the space," she said, voice trembling. I needed a moment, just one." Alexander took a slow breath. "I know what that's like." She looked at him curiously. "I don't always feel like I belong in this house either," he added. Her brows furrowed. "But it's your house." He gave a half smile, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. "That doesn't mean it always feels like home." Those words struck her somewhere deep. Before she could respond, the sound of a car outside broke the spell. A delivery, reality. She turned quickly. "I should get back to work." He didn't stop her, but just as she reached the doorway, he said softly, "Soraya." She froze. No one said her name like that, not the housekeepers, certainly not Vivian, not even herself, not lately. She turned, uncertain. He hesitated, then said, "You don't have to hide who you are, not when no one's watching." She gave the smallest of nods and slipped out the door. But she didn't realize. He watched her leave, every step. Later that evening, Soraya stood at the kitchen sink, scrubbing the same wine glass she'd held the morning before. Only now her hands trembled. She could still feel his gaze on her, still hear the way he said her name. She shook it off, convincing herself it meant nothing. It had to mean nothing. The next day, everything felt off. Alexander came downstairs for breakfast. Normally, Soraya left his coffee on the study desk and left the room before he arrived. But today, she brought it in herself. She placed the tray gently on the desk, avoiding his eyes. "Your coffee, sir." He looked up slowly. "Thank you, Soraya." Her heart skipped again. He said her name again. She looked at him, startled just for a second. "You don't have to call me sir every time, you know," he added, reaching for the cup. She blinked. "It's out of respect." Respect doesn't always have to sound so formal. She didn't know how to respond, so she nodded and turned to leave, but just as her hand touched the doorknob. "About yesterday," he said. She froze. "I didn't mean to scare you." She turned halfway, eyes unsure. "You looked free," he said, "and I liked seeing that side of you." Soraya's throat tightened. "I shouldn't have." "I'm not saying you should stop," he interrupted gently. There was a pause, thin, fragile, charged. Then a knock came from the front door, delivery again. The moment shattered. Soraya left without a word. That afternoon, she swept the main hallway, but her mind wasn't on the dust. She replayed every second of their brief conversation, every syllable. "You looked free." Why did that hit harder than anything anyone had ever told her? Why did it matter? Why did he notice? Meanwhile, Alexander sat in the study. Staring blankly at spreadsheets and revenue forecasts he couldn't focus on. He couldn't stop thinking about her. The music, the dress, the way she danced like no one had ever broken her. And yet he could tell they had. There was a softness in her that hadn't yet been extinguished, a spark that hadn't gone out, a strength disguised as quiet, and that haunted him. Later that day, as she was dusting the staircase, she heard footsteps approaching. But not hurried ones, calm, unthreatening. She turned. He stood there. Alexander held 2 cups of coffee. "You looked like you could use a break," he said, extending one to her. Her eyes widened. "For me?" He nodded. She reached out, and as their fingers brushed, neither pulled away too fast. They sat on the bottom step, sipping quietly, not boss and maid, not billionaire and help, just 2 people tired of pretending. "You don't talk much," she said softly, still not looking directly at him. He chuckled. "Neither do you. I guess we both learn to be quiet for different reasons." "Or the same one," he replied. She looked over, curious. "Which is?" He turned toward her. People only listen when they think you're someone worth hearing. Soraya stared into her cup, the coffee suddenly tasting more bitter than before. Then she smiled, just barely. Well, thanks for sharing the silence. He stood and gave a small nod. You can wear the dress again, by the way. She blinked. What? You looked happy in it, he said. And then he left. But her heart stayed exactly where he'd been standing. 3 days, that's how long the silence lasted. 3 days of morning coffee quietly shared at the edge of the staircase. 3 days of brief glances exchanged like hidden letters passed under a locked door. 3 days of soft smiles and gentle words that didn't mean nothing, but also couldn't mean everything, not yet. Then Vivian came home. The front door slammed open at exactly 9:47 a.m. The storm had returned in heels. Where is she? Where's my bag? My Fendi is missing. She barked before her suitcase even hit the floor. Soraya, who had just finished polishing the entryway mirror, stepped forward calmly. Welcome back, ma'am. Vivian turned, sunglasses still on. Don't welcome back me like you didn't rearrange this entire place while I was gone. It smells like lavender. Did you spray something? I cleaned the guest shelves with essential oil, Soraya replied softly. You what? Vivian's voice turned sharp. You think I asked for that? I didn't ask for creativity, I asked for clean. She stomped past, inspecting the house like a general reviewing troops, and then she froze. Her eyes locked on something resting neatly on the laundry counter just beyond the guest suite. The burgundy dress, freshly cleaned, folded perfectly, still smelling faintly of lilac soap. Vivian picked it up like it was radioactive. Her voice dropped icy and low. You wore this. Soraya's voice trembled. It was my off day. I didn't damage anything. I was alone. Vivian's jaw clenched. You wore this around my fiancé. She stepped forward, eyes narrowing. You think that dress makes you someone? You think spinning in circles in my house makes you anything more than background noise? Soraya didn't speak, but she didn't shrink either. Vivian's eyes flicked to her face, searching for fear. Instead, she found quiet resolve. It enraged her. You want a reminder of who you are, Vivian hissed. You are nothing here. You're a whisper, a wipe on a surface, a mop with legs. Soraya blinked but said nothing, not because she was afraid, but because she'd finally learned that silence can be dignity. Just then, footsteps echoed up the stairs. Alexander. He stepped into view, suitcase in hand, clearly having just returned. He paused, watching the scene unfold like a painting mid-brush stroke. What's going on? He asked, eyes shifting between them. Vivian flipped her hair. Just putting your little helper back in her place. Alexander didn't smile, didn't move. Instead, his gaze locked on Soraya. Are you all right? He asked, her lips parted. Yes, sir, she answered out of reflex, but her voice cracked. Alexander heard it. He turned to Vivian, a word in private. Vivian blinked. Now. Downstairs, the study door clicked shut. Vivian crossed her arms. She's a maid, Alexander. Why are you acting like she matters more than? You humiliated her, he interrupted. Vivian laughed. She humiliated herself, dancing around this house like she belongs here wearing that. Alexander stayed calm. She does belong here. Are you serious? I'm serious when I say people who treat others like they're nothing usually have nothing inside themselves. Vivian's mouth dropped open. I'm not going to argue, he added, but I won't stand by while you treat people like dust. Vivian's voice rose. You're defending her now. I'm defending decency. As the door opened and they emerged from the study, Soraya was walking through the hallway carrying a basket of folded towels. Vivian's face was still tight with fury. You think you've done something special, she sneered. You think because he looked at you once you're suddenly worth something. Soraya remained silent. Vivian stepped forward, lifting her hand, but before it could land, a hand caught her wrist. Alexander. The entire house froze. Don't you ever try that again, he said, voice like ice under flame. Vivian stared at him. You're siding with her in front of me. I'm not siding with anyone, he replied. I'm drawing a line. His eyes softened as he turned to Soraya. "Are you okay?" She nodded slowly, too stunned to speak. He looked back at Vivian. "I think it's time you packed your things." Vivian's voice trembled, not with fear, but with rage. "You're going to regret this." Alexander didn't flinch. "If regret is the price of doing what's right, I'll pay it." Vivian stormed upstairs without another word. That evening, the house was too quiet again. But this time, it wasn't cold. It was reflective. Alexander found Soraya sitting outside on the small stone bench behind the laundry room, the burgundy dress folded in her lap like a piece of her she'd almost lost. He approached slowly. "Do you mind?" She looked up, surprised. "No, you can sit." They sat in silence, a peaceful one. He glanced down at the dress. "That color suits you." She smiled faintly. "It reminds me who I was before this place made me forget." Alexander nodded. "And who is that?" She looked ahead at the soft blue dusk. "Someone who used to believe in joy." He turned to her. "Then let's find it again." And in that moment, with the fading light brushing their faces, it wasn't about love or status or roles. It was about two tired hearts, finally hearing each other beat. The next morning didn't feel like morning at all. It felt like something softer, like the first breath after holding your tears too long. Soraya moved through the house as always, dusting corners, folding napkins, washing glasses, but everything felt different, not because the work changed, but because she had. She walked straighter, breathed deeper. Even the house, once a cage of whispers, now felt like it had windows again. As she polished the tall windows of the dining room, a reflection caught her eye. Alexander barefoot, holding a plate of toast and smiling. "Made extra," he said, holding it out. She blinked. "For me." He nodded. "And there's tea. I didn't burn the water this time." She laughed softly, too surprised to stop it. "The great Alexander Hale can boil water. Don't tell Forbes, it'll ruin my brand." They ate breakfast at the Marble Island like two people who had accidentally found safety in each other. They talked about random things. Her favorite fruit, mango. His irrational fear of pigeons, the way he once got stuck in a Paris elevator with a dog influencer and 3 Yorkies. Soraya laughed until her stomach ached. Alexander leaned in like the sound of her joy was something rare, something to be collected. Later that afternoon, she stood in front of the mirror in her tiny room. The burgundy dress lay across the bed. This time, she didn't hesitate. She wore it again, not to impress, not to rebel, just because it felt like her. As she wiped the glass coffee table in the sitting room, music played softly from the Bluetooth speaker. She didn't notice Alexander watching her from the hallway. When she finally turned, his eyes were already there. "You wore it again," he said. "I did," she replied, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "You look like someone who belongs here." She hesitated, then raised her chin just slightly. "Maybe I do." There was a pause, then his voice lowered. "Would you have dinner with me tonight?" She blinked. In the dining room, nothing formal, just food and company. She searched his face for motive. "Like a date?" she asked cautiously. He smiled. "Like a moment between two people who don't want to pretend anymore." She didn't answer right away, but eventually she nodded. That night, Soraya lit a single candle and served rice and stewed vegetables. The kind that tasted like memory, not money. She didn't wear perfume or jewelry, just the dress, a soft bun, and her calm. Alexander arrived in a navy shirt and jeans. No suit, no mask. They ate slowly, no phones, no staff, just words and eye contact, just him and her. And for the first time since Soraya had walked into this mansion, she didn't feel like she was trespassing. She felt seen. After clearing the dishes, she moved to the kitchen, the radio still humming quietly in the background. From the hallway, Alexander leaned against the door frame, sipping water, watching her. "You clean up too fast," he said. She turned, smiling. "Old habits." He stepped forward. "I've been thinking about that day," he said, voice lower now. "The one in the master bedroom," he added. She stilled. "I wanted to say something then," he continued, "but I didn't know what." You don't have to explain. Yes, I do, he interrupted gently. You weren't just dancing, you were alive, and for the first time, this house wasn't made of stone. The music shifted. A soft, high-life tune began to play, the same one she'd danced to days before. Their eyes met. I remember this song, he said. She nodded, her voice barely audible. I used to dance to it when I needed to feel something. And now, she looked down. Now I don't feel so alone. He took a step closer. You never finished that dance. Her brows rose. You want me to dance again? No, he whispered. I want to dance with you. She stared at him, stunned. He held out a hand, just once. Slowly, cautiously, Soraya placed her hand in his. They moved awkwardly at first. He stepped on her toe. She tripped into his chest. They both laughed, but soon they found rhythm, not in perfection, but in presence. She rested her head against his chest. He closed his eyes. For a moment, it wasn't about what they were. It was about who they were becoming. A maid in a borrowed dress. A billionaire who forgot how to love. Moving together, slow and real. When the music faded, they didn't speak. They didn't have to, because something had been said in the way he held her, and everything had changed. The days that followed felt like something out of a dream. Not a grand, cinematic dream, but a quiet one. No dramatic declarations. No red carpets or breaking news headlines. Just two people moving closer in a world that used to push them apart. Soraya and Alexander began to live in the same space, not just under the same roof. He joined her in the kitchen sometimes, offering to chop vegetables with terrible form. You're cutting like the carrot insulted your ancestors, she teased one afternoon. I'm trying to survive your sarcasm. He shot back, smirking. She laughed, and he smiled like the sound of her joy was a language he wanted to speak fluently. They shared lunches on the patio, fried plantains wrapped in brown paper, fingers greasy, laughter loud. At night, they sat on the balcony with mugs of tea, talking about everything and nothing. Soraya told him about her dream of opening a little daycare for children who had nowhere safe to go. Alexander told her how, after losing his parents at 16, he vowed to build something so big no one could ever hurt him again. You did build it, she said quietly one evening. But the pain didn't go away, he replied, staring into the dusk. Maybe it's not supposed to, she said. Maybe it's what teaches us how to love gently. He didn't respond, not with words. But as she turned to leave that night, he reached out and gently touched her fingers. No pressure, no performance, just a quiet way to say, I see you. She smiled back. I see you too. The next morning, Soraya returned to her daily uniform, a black dress, apron tied at the waist. Alexander frowned when he saw her. Back to that. She shrugged. Some parts of me I still need to hold on to. He nodded. That's fair. But, she added, straightening her shoulders, I remember who I am now, even dressed like this. He stepped closer, took her hand gently. You've never been a shadow, I just never looked properly. And she smiled, not like a maid, not like a woman begging to be seen, but like someone who had finally made peace with her own reflection. Saturday morning came dressed in gold. Sunlight streamed into the house like it had been waiting months for this day. Birds chirped softly. Curtains swayed in the breeze. Even the marble floors seemed warmer somehow. Upstairs in the guest suite that had slowly become hers, Soraya stood in front of the mirror. No apron, no black uniform, just a simple cream dress, soft and elegant, with a delicate gold chain resting on her collarbone. Her hair was wrapped in a scarf the color of rosewood. Her eyes steady, her spirit calm. Downstairs, Alexander paced in the living room, not in a suit, not for a press conference. He was nervous, because today wasn't about business. It was about something infinitely more terrifying. Honesty. As Soraya descended the staircase, time seemed to hesitate. Alexander looked up and the room disappeared. She wasn't a guest. She wasn't staff. She was the woman who had filled the silence with song. The woman who made his stone heart feel sunlight again. You look like royalty, he said, barely breathing. She chuckled. Royalty doesn't scrub toilets. He stepped forward, holding something behind his back. Maybe this one does, but not anymore. He brought out a small velvet box. Her breath caught. Is that? Not a ring, he said quickly. Not yet. He opened it to reveal a silver bracelet, simple and elegant, with her name, Soraya, engraved delicately on the inside. This is a promise, he said, that you're no longer invisible in this house or in this world, that you belong here however you choose. Tears welled up, but she blinked them away. I never thought someone like me. He stopped her. You're not someone like anything, you're just you, and that's exactly who I want. She held out her wrist. He fastened the bracelet gently. And for a moment there was no billionaire, no maid, only two people standing on the edge of something honest. Behind the curtain on the upper floor, someone watched. Vivian. She had returned unexpectedly, quietly, and what she saw made her chest tighten. Not rage, not jealousy, but grief. He used to look at me like that, she thought. She didn't scream, she didn't interrupt. She just whispered, so soft only the velvet curtains heard it. I was too loud to ever hear love. And then she turned and walked away, not like a queen, but like someone who had just realized the crown was never really hers. Back downstairs, Soraya turned toward the grand window. The sun was pouring in, golden and full. Alexander reached for her hand. She didn't pull away, and in that quiet, simple moment, she was home, not because of the mansion, not because of the bracelet, but because someone had finally looked at her and never looked away. I've learned that sometimes the loudest transformation happens in silence. No one announces when your heart begins to heal, when you stop shrinking yourself to fit someone else's shadow, when you finally realize you were never invisible. They just never looked properly. I used to think power was about having control. Now I believe the real power is in seeing someone who's been overlooked and choosing to honor them. So ask yourself, who around you have you passed by without truly seeing? And maybe more importantly, when was the last time you fully saw yourself? Because dignity isn't something someone gives you. It's something you reclaim, quietly, day by day, decision by decision. If this story sparked something in you, I want to hear it. What did you feel? What did it remind you of? A speech balloon, drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one. And if you found this story meaningful and want to help us share these important values, please subscribe to our channel so you won't miss the next inspiring story. Together, we can build a strong community full of potential and a spirit of justice. Because stories like this aren't just fiction. They're mirrors, reminding us what it means to be human.